Well, good morning, folks. This is Billy Trout with the Tennessee Department of Revenue's Taxpayer Education section. And on behalf of our Commissioner, David Geragino, and our staff in Taxpayer Education, we'd like to welcome you to today's presentation on business tax for Tennessee contractors. We hope that this information will be very helpful to you, and we'll be going through quite a bit of information and giving you some examples today that will be very helpful for you. Along with me today, I've got Miss Katie Julian, who will be directing us through a PowerPoint here too. And as Katie will tell you in a few minutes, we have this posted to our website. You can now get that PDF and print that off or save it to your computer if you'd like, whatever you'd like to do on that too. I'd like to also introduce Mr. Mitch Gibson, who will be with us today from our call center. And certainly we get a lot of questions about business tax this time of year, and he'll be joining us as well. And our assistant director, Dan Vinson, is available as well to help us today too. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn that over to Kate, or turn this over to Katie, and we'll continue with the presentation. Thank you, Katie.
Hey, thanks, Billy, and welcome everyone to our free monthly tax webinar on business tax for contractors. This is a topic that is easy to get twisted around about. So if you're here, you probably already know that, but it's one of those, the rules for business tax rules for contractors is kind of a beast into itself. There's no other industry that's treated like contractors when it comes to business tax. So hopefully we'll take some of that guesswork out of it for you. As Billy mentioned, there is a PDF of this presentation if you want to follow along. So some of the hyperlinks that we have, you won't be able to click into them from the WebEx, but you can click through on the PDF on them. So you can look in the chat for the link to that, or there's a link over on the tax webinars webpage that you registered for this event on. You go to tn.gov/revenue, click on taxpayer education, and then tax webinars, and you'll see a link for today's materials. So let's go ahead and move along here. Today we're going to be talking about those special rules that apply just to contractors, that are special just for contractors. We're going to be talking about how these rules apply to both in-state and out-of-state contractors. We'll discuss filing the business tax return, how to handle subcontractor deductions, which is another aspect of business tax that applies only to contractors. Closing locations, that's another topic we'll discuss, because that's a little bit different for contractors as well, or actually not quite different how to close a business, close a location with business tax, but contractors end up with, especially busy ones, end up with a lot of locations opened. If you've ever done a certain amount of work in a certain jurisdiction, you're going to have a location for that jurisdiction for business tax, and you may not want all those or need all those. So that's a relevant topic that we'll discuss. And then we're going to break for a chat to answer some of your questions and talk about some of our resources. We are going to have chat closed just during this PowerPoint part, but then we're going to open it up as soon as we're done with this. So for the second half of the presentation today, the chat will be open and you can put your questions into the chat for us to discuss with Mitch, our subject matter expert, and the panel here. So keep those questions in mind as we progress through the PowerPoint slides, and pop them in the chat when we open up the chat here in a few minutes. Okay, so can't get very far here without first defining what is a contractor according to Tennessee law. For business tax purposes, a contractor is defined as a person or entity that's engaged in the business of contracting, performing a contract, or engaging in any of the activities or activities like the following: being an exterminator, installing tangible personal property, constructing, building, erecting, repairing, grading, excavating. I won't go through every thing in that third bullet point there, but you get the picture. Basically improving real property. So exterminating services, installing tangible personal property, or improving real property. Mitch, you got something to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to add, we get a lot of questions from contractors on if they're a contractor or not. To keep it simple, contractors are any business that makes improvements to real property. And so if you fit into any of those business activities, then you would probably be defined as a contractor. So I just wanted to add that point in there.
For sure. And, some people may consider themselves doing contract work. So you might be in computer repair and do some contract work throughout the state, or you're an interior designer and do contract work in various jurisdictions throughout the state of Tennessee. Those are not considered contractors in terms of business tax law. Those businesses will just have a location where they're based, or locations where they are based if they've got multiple physical locations. Won't get into too much there. We do have some good other webinars. If you go to our webinar video archive in the same place where you registered here, you can find some information there about general business tax rules. But again, we're just going to be talking today about these contractors who make improvements to real property, install tangible personal property, or render exterminating services. So that's how our law defines contractor with regards to that. Another important definition here, and this will make a little bit more sense in the next few slides, but you'll hear the term, we'll use this term a lot, deemed location. So domicile location is going to be where you're based. Deemed location is a county or municipality or jurisdiction where a contractor is not domiciled or located, but where the contractor earns taxable receipts, gross receipts basically of over 50,000. We're going to keep exploring that a little bit more later if that doesn't completely compute just yet. Taxable receipts from contracts performed in each deemed location. So for each location outside of where you're domiciled, must be reported on the return for the jurisdiction where that work was performed. And that is the big thing that makes contractors different from every other industry with regards to business tax, is that those gross receipts, if they're over 50, they're going to be reported on the location, on your return for the location where that work was performed. Taxable receipts of 50,000 or less for compensation from contracts in a jurisdiction other than your domiciled location must be reported on the return for the jurisdiction where you're domiciled. Again, we're going to explore that a little further here in a few minutes. It's up to the contractor to correctly determine what jurisdiction each job is in order to obtain the proper licensing and know how to file for business tax accordingly. And there's a link here. Again, if you've got the PDF, you can click on this link. It's a PDF that tells you which, okay, so let me back up a minute. Every county has business tax, right? They call it the state level tax, but every county that you work in, there's no exemption there. But there are many, many cities and towns in the state of Tennessee. Some have business tax and business licensing enacted, some do not. If you're wondering where you are doing a job, if it has business tax or not, so if you're going to need that license, if you meet the threshold that we'll discuss, this is a link to a listing that will tell you which municipalities or cities and towns do have business tax where you're going to have to report to. And there's also, Mitch just put a link into the chat that's a map. You want to explain that link a little further, Mitch?
Yeah, so I just shared an additional resource that we have on our website. This particular link is really helpful. You can search specific addresses that are located within the state of Tennessee, and it will share with you some important information. Now, we predominantly use this resource for sales tax. However, it can be helpful for business tax because it can tell you where that location is located as it pertains to a county or a city. And so whenever you're trying to determine if that deemed location that you're doing work in is actually located within a city limit or if it's only in a county, this can also be a helpful tool that you can use. It's on our website, and yeah, so we recommend you use it if
So
it's
you
helpful.
can use it kind of in conjunction with the other link that I've got here to the listing. First, maybe if you're just unsure, in some areas, like if you're in Nashville, you know you're in Nashville and you know that that's a city that has business tax and business licensing, but there might be some other smaller areas where you're just not sure. And sometimes an address and what's listed as the city in their address is not necessarily, when you actually plug in the zip code on that map that Mitch was just talking about, it will tell you exactly what municipality you're in. Then you can go over and look at the PDF of where business tax is and is not. this link that's on the slide right here, and see if you are going to be see if that municipality that you're working in has business tax and licensing. I know that's a little bit confusing, but might make some more sense to you if you are able to access those two links, the map that Mitch put in, and then the PDF that we've got at the bottom of this slide here that you can access in your PDF of today's presentation. So that's first. It's up to you to determine if you're working in a municipality that requires business tax or not. Keep good records. We always tell contractors, just for each job you do, maybe in one of our examples or in several of our examples that we're going to give you later, we'll show you kind of a good way to do it. You keep a ledger basically of everywhere where you've got gross sales, because you may have a job that doesn't add up to this $50,000 mark in one of your municipalities that you're working in, but let's say a couple months later you do another job there and it pushes you over that limit. That's why keeping a good ledger of the gross receipts that you're getting from each job is going to be really helpful for you. So as you may know, business license and business tax are very closely tied together. The business license the initial business license is obtained locally. The very first step, if you need a license, is going to be to go to the county clerk or your city office and obtain the license there. Once you do that, they're going to transmit the local offices. We work really closely with them. Our systems actually speak to each other. Once you obtain that license locally, you automatically then have a business tax location for that jurisdiction. And we're talking about a standard business license here. So once you obtain that standard business license, you have a business tax account for that location. For renewing that license, for a standard business license, you're going to renew it by filing the annual business tax return with us, the Tennessee Department of Revenue. If you've just got a minimal business license, which is pretty rare with contractors, but it could be the case for you, you'll renew that directly through your local official. Only one license per jurisdiction is needed. So let's say you've got multiple jobs taking place in one particular county, you still just need one county license. If you're meeting that threshold, you don't need multiple licenses there. Okay, so now we're going to talk about, this is an overview of contractors in general, and then we're going to break it down after this and how this applies to both in-state and out-of-state with regards to the county or state level tax and the municipal or city level tax. So we're presenting to you today a few different ways to look at the same thing, a few different ways to skin the cat here, so to speak. Receipts of more than $50,000 in any jurisdiction. Registration and license are required for both the city and or county, and this applies to both in-state and out-of-state contractors. So if you've got gross receipts over 50 in any jurisdiction, that takes the guesswork out of it. It's pretty cut and dry. You're going to register for business tax and have a license for that jurisdiction, and the tax is going to be sourced to that jurisdiction. For in-state contractors, receipts of $50,000 or less than a jurisdiction, no additional license is required, and those gross receipts are going to be reported back to your domicile location. There's a note at the bottom of this slide here that's pretty important. I want to make sure you understand that when we're talking about licenses required and everything, it's just with regards to Tennessee tax law. You may be required to obtain a license in order to pull a permit locally, but that's up to local ordinances. We're just going to be talking today about how the requirements with regards to tax law. So they work together. If you're not really required to obtain a license according to tax law, but they're telling you locally that you need a license to pull a permit. If you want a permit, you need to obtain that license, right? Because I'm sure if you're working, you can't really proceed without a permit. So moving on to the third bullet here, out-of-state contractors, receipts of 10 to 50,000 in a county must pay on the state business tax return. On your state return, it's going to be a location of 9999 in your business tax return. So let's break all this down now further It's going to look a little more complicated, and then we're going to pull it together and hopefully make it take some guesswork out of it. So for in-state contractors, the state level tax, also known as county level, gross receipts of less than 10,000, you're exempt from business tax. You'll get a minimal activity license where you're domiciled, where you're based out of. And that is, of course, if you make more than 3. So between 3 and 10 in gross sales, no business tax required, but a minimal activity license from where your business is based out of, whether you've got a storefront for your business or just based out of your home. Gross receipts less than 10,000 in your domicile county or sourced to that domicile county, or more than 50 in another county, it's taxable in the deemed location. So where you're making more than 50. A standard license is required in that deemed location, and a minimal activity license in the domicile county. And again, that's if you make more than 3 in sales from the domicile county. Gross receipts more than 10,000 in your domicile county or sourced to the domicile county, and more than 50 in another county are taxable in the domicile county, taxable in the deemed location, and a standard license in the deemed location or county is needed, and a standard license in the domicile county is needed. Okay, this is going to look very similar, but just pretty much replace the word county with city or municipal level here. Less than 10,000 or between 3 and 10,000, this first bullet, no business tax required, minimal license required in your domicile county. Gross receipts of less than 10 in the city where you're domiciled, or more than 50 in another city or municipality, taxable in the deemed location. A standard license in that deemed location and a minimal activity license in your domicile location. Gross receipts of more than 10 in your domicile or more than 50 in any other, taxable in both the domicile and deemed location. Standard license required in both deemed and domicile. Between gross receipts and let me make note here. I don't think I've mentioned this yet. We're talking about annual gross receipts, the gross receipts that come in during the tax year. Between 10 and 50 in a city other than where you're domiciled, this is where things are a little bit different than the county. So anything between 10 and 50 in a city other than your domicile. So that's going to be sourced and taxed in your domicile city. So if you live in Chattanooga, or if your business is based in Chattanooga and you do under 50 in, let's say, city of Red Bank, those gross receipts are going to get sourced back on your Chattanooga location return. That is, unless you are domiciled in an unincorporated area. So if you live outside of the city limits, or not live, sorry, your business is based outside of the city limits. For those gross receipts on jobs that you do that are between 10 and 50 in in a city or municipality, those receipts are not going to be taxed to any municipality. Of course, they'll be taxed to us on the state and county level, but all right. Past 3 slides actually are going to be wrapped up in a little chart here that might make it make more sense to you if this is the way your brain works, which it is for me personally. You can look here. We've got annual gross receipts in the first column. The next column is where the license is required. And then we've got the state and municipal level tax. So I'm going to focus on that first box that's combined here under state or county level and municipal or city level. So anything under 50, receipts under 50 from contracts in a jurisdiction other than where you're domiciled are reported on the return for where you're domiciled. Like I was just talking about, if your business is based in Chattanooga and you have a job that you did in city of Red Bank for $35,000, you're going to report that $35,000 on your Chattanooga return because it's under $50,000. Look at the next big block down. Receipts over 50 are reported on the return for the location where receipts are generated. So your business is domiciled in Chattanooga, and you do a $60,000 gross receipt job in Red Bank. That's going to go to Red Bank. Okay, if 50,000 is your threshold here, you're looking at over or under 50,000 to determine where you put that on your return. And again, we've got some little notes here. You see the 1 asterisk here, and this is for receipts that are under 50 in a domiciled location. If you don't have a domicile city, if you're located in an unincorporated area, again, those amounts don't get reported to any city or municipality. If there are receipts, the 2 asterisks, the note in the next block down, if there are receipts for over 50,000 in an unincorporated area, those receipts are not reported to any municipality. Okay, we're going to put the rubber to the road here and look at how this looks in some examples. We've got a few examples here that will demonstrate a range of scenarios. On this one, we've got, let's look at the ledger over on the left. Let's make note here that the contractor for this example is located in a city, so it's not an unincorporated area. They're domiciled in Clarksville in Montgomery County, okay? And if you want to kind of study this example and see it written in a different way and actually graphed out in a different way, you can go to our business tax manual, page 141. We'll show you here in a little while where you can find that. But if some of this is starting to click, but you want to dive a little deeper and make sure you understand it, like I've had to do multiple times, this is a reference for you there. So the blue chart on your left, gross receipts. We're looking at, you've done all this work throughout the year, throughout the tax year, gross receipts in these areas. Now it could be that you've done multiple jobs in some of these, but we're just looking at adding it all up. You've done 1,505,000 in Clarksville, Montgomery County. That's where you're domiciled, right? $35,000 worth of gross receipts in Montgomery County, which is your county, but outside of the city limits in unincorporated areas. $60,000 in gross receipts from Madison County in the city of Jackson. $1,500,000 in Shelby County, but in an unincorporated part of Shelby County. $300,000 in gross receipts in out of state. 100,000 in Morgan County in the municipality of Oliver Springs. Okay, now I want you to look over to the orange chart on the right, and we're going to figure out how to source these, and I'm going to break it down line by line. So on your business tax return for the Montgomery County location, for your gross receipts, you're going to add together both of your Montgomery County receipts here, which add up to 1,540,000. Well over the threshold there. So that amount, you're going to be licensed there, and that amount gets put on line 1 for gross receipts for Montgomery County. So for city of Clarksville, that's where you're domiciled, right? You did 1,505,000 in Clarksville, and then you did 35,000 in an unincorporated area. It just happens to be in your county, but it wouldn't have really mattered. It's under that 50,000. So going back to our chart here, receipts under 50, let me see if I can point to this. I haven't used this very often, but we're looking right here. Receipts under 50 from contracts in a county or city other than the contractor's place of domicile must be reported on the return for the city or county of their domicile location. So that right there is where you see that. Okay, that's a receipt of under $50,000 that took place in a jurisdiction that was unincorporated. See that right here. Madison County, that's pretty cut and dry. 60,000 to Madison County. Same with City of Jackson. Now make note here that there are 2 separate locations, even though that was one job, or let's say it was one job, for example. $60,000 job, you had gross receipts of $60,000 in Jackson and Madison County. You're going to report that on a Madison County location return and on a City of Jackson return. This is another thing that sets contractors apart from other businesses. Other businesses, you're going to see your city and county combined on one return. Not the case for contractors. You're going to have lots of cities and counties. Okay, 1.5 million to Shelby County. That does not go to any municipality. That 1.5 million will get reported on a Shelby County return. But if you remember back here, look right here, if there are receipts for over 50K in an unincorporated area, those receipts are not reported to any municipality. They're reported to Shelby, but they're not going to go back to Clarksville. They're not going to go to any municipality. Morgan County and City of Oliver Springs, that's pretty cut and dry here. That was over 50, so you're going to have a license and report those sales, the $100,000 to Morgan County and to City of Oliver Springs. So the few things I want you to make note of here is that we are looking at a contractor that's in a municipality. Next, we'll look at one that's not, and how things are sourced that way. What happens when there's gross receipts in a municipality outside of your own, but that are over 50,000, just like the ones right there, to the work that was done in an unincorporated part of Shelby. And we're also looking here at a out-of-state job that does not get reported. Receipts from contracts performed in an out-of-state are not included in gross receipts. So a few different examples there of how these rules that you see here come into play. We're going to look at another example here. This contractor is domiciled in the city of Chattanooga in Hamilton County. Let's look at all of their gross receipts. They've got $250,000 in gross receipts from their domicile, which is Hamilton, city of Chattanooga, $40,000 in Hamilton, city of Red Bank, $60,000 in Hamilton East Ridge, $100,000 in unincorporated areas of Hamilton County, $150,000 in gross receipts from Bradley County, city of Cleveland, $35,000 in unincorporated areas of Bradley County, and then $20,000 in Whitwell and Marion County, $15,000 in Jasper and Marion County. Let's break this down in the orange chart on your right. $485,000 is going to be reported as gross sales on your Hamilton County return. And what we've done there is we've added up all 4 jobs that took place in Hamilton County, but then we also added in there the $35,000 in gross receipts that were sourced to Marion County, because the total there, 20,000 plus 15,000, that's the total the amount they did in Marion. If you add up the Marion County jobs, that falls under 50,000. So just keep in mind, we got 50,000 here. Anything under that, the receipts get sourced back to your domicile location. So Hamilton County is going to get that. Now let's look at the next location on their return, which is going to be for City of Chattanooga. This one's interesting, and we see some of the rules we discussed in play here. They had 250,000 in gross receipts in the City of Chattanooga. We're going to add to that all the different area municipalities where they did work that was under 50,000. $50,000 threshold. Under 50, it gets reported back to your domicile city. And they have one domicile city here, right? Chattanooga. So when you add, my math is right here. I had a couple of different people check me, but adding up the work they did in Chattanooga, and then Red Bank, that unincorporated job they did over in Bradley, the job they did in Whitwell and in Jasper, all of that adds up to $365,000. That's what they're going to put on line 1 of their Chattanooga return. They're going to have a City of East Ridge location and a license for there because they did over 50, right? That one's pretty simple, 60 to City of East Ridge. We're adding up for Bradley County. They'll definitely need a license there because their gross receipts were over 50. And we added up the 2 jobs, the one in Cleveland and the one and the job that was in an unincorporated area, to add up to 185,000 in Bradley County and 150 in the city of Cleveland. So a few things in play there that might start making this make sense to you here. Now, the third and final example we have for in-state contractors. Oh, Mitch, you got something to add to this slide here? Okay.
So sorry. I just wanted to add, we get a lot of taxpayers in the general call center, specifically contractors who have a laundry list of licenses. Maybe they got licenses from previous years where they had a job, and then this current year when they filed, they actually didn't really have that much, gross sales to report for that deemed location. And so on this example, you'll see Marion County had gross sales of 20,000. They also had another job of 15,000. Now, those do not meet the threshold to warrant having a license for that year that they're filing these gross receipts. So those sales would be sourced to their domiciled location. However, since the contractor has had that license from previous years, that Marion County location is still going to show up on the return. So it's going to be there's going to be a temptation to report those sales on that Marion County location.
Right.
So it's really important to focus on these thresholds, and I would recommend going back to the chart that Katie provided earlier. That's a very, very helpful thing. I like charts. They make everything a lot easier, and so it all has to do with these thresholds. And so I just wanted to add that fact. It doesn't mean that you have to close out that license for Marion County. In this example, if you do have a Marion County deemed location, you would just report a $0 return for that location. And you may want to keep that license to use for future years. It just depends on what you need for your business. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah,
Good
and
point.
and I can just chime in on that too real quick. Mitch said that so well. It's really incumbent on our contractors out there to manage these profiles for these different cities and counties in the way that you would like them. Some contractors are very religious about going in and closing out locations so that they do not have to force a $0, which by the way equates to a $22 minimum tax for that location on their return. So some people want to close them out. Others are like, just leave it open. I'll probably use it again. Don't care. Going to go ahead and pay. That's your decision. We want to help you with that. But the one thing we want to encourage everybody to do, we're recording this today in late March of 23. We know that in 3 weeks we have a due date for business tax for most of you as taxpayers. This is better addressed now than it is 3 weeks from now. So please go out there, look at what you need, reach out for assistance. Katie's going to tell you about how to get assistance from us here in a little bit. So thank you. That's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Such a good point that Billy just made about we've got a few weeks here before business taxes due. And just to put into play here, like Mitch was saying, let's say you have a Marion County license, which means a Marion County location on your business tax profile. But you didn't do enough work to need to report the sales there. This is where you would make that decision, like they were saying. Do you want to keep that location open and just file 0 on it, because those receipts you made there are getting sourced elsewhere, right, over to your domicile? Or do you want, so you can close it out, you can file 0 on it, pay your $22 on it, and maybe you do a lot of work there and want to keep it there so you don't have to go back to the local office next time you do a job and get another license. Maybe you just want to keep it active. Cool. File 0, good to go. If you do want to close it out, I'm going to mention this twice. I'm going to mention it right now because we're talking about it, but then when we talk about closing out locations here in a few minutes, I'll repeat myself. But let's say for this year we're talking about right here, let's say that this was in 2022. So we're looking at a return that we're about to file right now or in the next couple weeks, hopefully timely, right? For using these numbers, and you're thinking, maybe I've got a Marion County and Whitwell and Jasper location over on my business tax profile, but I don't need to source anything to them, and I really don't want to pay that minimum tax or pay that 0. I probably won't ever do another job there again. You would need to actually, if you didn't, you could go and close it out as of, actually, Billy, Mitch, Dan, repeat me if I'm wrong here. You could close it out as of December 31st, 2021.
Right, right. You
Right.
can do
Okay.
that. That's correct. And the
On
the
TINTAC.
main thing is accuracy, and your examples here are very clear about what the law requires. But you've mentioned before, certain municipalities have licensing requirements that are tied into their zoning and stuff like that. That's outside of business tax law, and we try to accommodate. And you, as a contractor, are put in that sort of position to where you have to get a license in certain situations anyway, which is outside of what we're talking about today, particularly. But bottom line is, you as the contractor have the administrative control to make this happen in whatever way you want it to happen. But sooner is better than later. Okay, there you go.
That's right, for sure. Because this stuff does get confusing. I get twisted around about it, even just talking about it again right now, and I understand it. So doing this now and answering all your questions about it and getting it figured out. If you're a contractor joining us here today, or you're a CPA that works with contractors, we can't stress enough how getting this taken care of sooner rather than later, because it is complex, rather than waiting till the day before it's due and contacting us and having longer wait times than usual. Let's get it taken care of now, because it can get kind of convoluted. So okay, this third example we're going to look at here throws a different scenario into the mix. Now we're looking at a contractor that is domiciled in an unincorporated area, all right, of Hamilton County in this example. These numbers on the left are exactly the same as the slide before, where we had a contractor that had a domiciled municipality that lived within a city, which was Chattanooga on the other example. But now we're looking at same numbers, but this contractor lives in the outskirts of the county in an unincorporated area. So it's going to be sourced a little bit differently. Look over at the chart on your right, how the receipts are sourced. Hamilton County, still, we're adding up all of the Hamilton County jobs, and also adding that 35,000 from Marion, because it's a county where they did under 50. All that gets sourced back over to Hamilton County, totaling 485,000 getting sourced to Hamilton County, line 1 of the Hamilton County return. City of Chattanooga. So this contractor doesn't live in City of Chattanooga like the previous one. They're unincorporated, but they're going to be having a City of Chattanooga. They're going to have a Chattanooga location on their business tax return and have to get a license there, because they are well over that $50,000 threshold there. City of East Ridge. They did over 50 in that jurisdiction, so they're going to have a license and report those sales back to that jurisdiction. Bradley County, same thing. They did over 50,000. If you add up the two Bradley County areas there, 150,000 plus 35,000, that 185 will get sourced over to Bradley County, and they'll have a license from Bradley County. And the City of Cleveland will have 150. They'll have a license from the City of Cleveland, and 150 will get sourced to the City of Cleveland. Now, you'll notice some municipalities, some cities missing from the orange chart on your right. Why is that? That is because there were several municipalities that this contractor worked in where they did under $50,000 worth of work, but the contractor does not have a municipality or a city that those would get sourced to. So they kind of go, as I like to say, poof. Of course, they're getting accounted for. The contractor is paying tax for those at the state level in these counties, but those amounts are not going to get reported to any municipality, because this contractor does not live in a municipality. And what we're looking at there, just to go back a few slides and look back at the chart, is this right here. If there's no domicile city for the contractor, so they're based in an unincorporated area, city receipts under 50,000 are not reported to any city. So you see an example here where we had a few different scenarios that played in: an out-of-state job, a big job that took place in an unincorporated area of Shelby County. We had some other things come into play in this example, where a lot of the receipts for municipalities under 50 all got added into their domicile, Chattanooga. And here we've got a contractor in an unincorporated area that did some work under 50 in some other cities. So those amounts did not get sourced anywhere, to any municipality, I should say. All right, that's it on in-state contractors. Now we're going to talk about how these rules apply to out-of-state contractors. It's a little less complicated in my opinion, but you may feel the same. Gross receipts of over 50,000 in any location in Tennessee, in any Tennessee county, contractor must obtain a license from that county, and state level business tax is due on the receipts. All right. Gross receipts of over 50,000 in any Tennessee municipality or city/town. Contractor must obtain a license from that municipality, and the municipal level business tax is due on the receipts. This is in addition to filing it on the county level, so you're going to file it on both. Gross receipts of 10 to 50,000 in any Tennessee county, no local license required. according to tax law. Again, locally they may make you get one. They may make you get a license to pull a permit, but for tax law purposes, no local license is required, but receipts must be reported on the contractor's out-of-state location, which again is listed as 9999. Out-of-state contractors whose annual gross sales are 10,000 or less in any county are not taxed on the income derived from sales in that county. These sales should not be reported on the business tax return. All right, here's a chart. See, it's even the chart's a little simpler for out of state. 10 to 50, no license needed. State or county level tax is reported on the state level return. So your out of state location, 9999. No municipal or city level tax needed on $10,000 to $50,000 of gross receipts. Over 50, you'll need a license from both the city and or county. It's reported on the county location return, state level taxes, and reported on for the municipal level. It's reported for the return for the city location. Again, under 10, gross receipts under 10, no license or tax required. A couple of examples we've got here. We've got a contractor domiciled in Kentucky who receives compensation of $10,000 in Davidson County, 21 in Williamson, and 5 in Sumner. Because he has receipts of 10,000 or more in at least one Tennessee county, they should register and file one return with the Tennessee Department of Revenue. We've got total receipts of 31,000, only the receipts of counties where he earns at least 10,000. So that if you look at the chart down here, the 10,000 to Davidson, excuse me, that's going to get reported on the out-of-state location return on the 9999 location because it's under 50. Same with the Williamson County, or I should say between 10 and 50. They did $21,000 worth in Williamson County. It's going to go on their out-of-state location return. That amount of gross receipts that they made in Sumner County, they do not have to report for anywhere because the receipts were under 10,000. A little bit more complicated gross receipts here for this out-of-state contractor. Say they're domiciled in Georgia and receive compensation of $100,000 in Hamilton, Chattanooga, $55,000 in Bradley, Cleveland, and $45,000 in Sequatchie, Dunlap, $5,000 in Marion County, City of Jasper. See the breakdown here, 100,000 goes to Hamilton because it's over 50 and they'll need a license there. 100,000 to Chattanooga, source to Chattanooga, and they'll need a license there. Same with Bradley and Cleveland because it's over 50,000. That was that 55,000 amount in gross sales. So that goes on those returns, on those locations, I'm sorry. Sequatchie though, 45,000, that's under the $50,000 mark. So that amount is going to get sourced on the out-of-state location, the 9999 location, because it's between 10 and 50. 45,000 in Dunlap, not going to be reported because municipality receipts are under 50,000. Jasper and Marion County, not reported anywhere because it's under 10,000. All right, we're not going to spend a lot of time because this was a lot of information and we're actually getting kind of low on time here. I want to just point you to some resources for business tax filing. It is required electronically and you can access a webinar about filing the business tax return. If you've got questions about that, we've got a link to the video and a link to the PDF here. One thing I do want to make note of is that gross sales are reported per location on line 1. Most businesses report sales for a period in which a sale is made. However, contractors report business tax on a cash basis, which I know a lot of contractors work on when you're getting a draw. Progress payment charges billed pursuant to a contract are reported in the period for which the payments are received. Payments to subcontractors. This is actually pretty simple. Contractors are able to deduct amounts paid to subcontractors. That sub must have a business license or a contractor's license. That's why we get a ton of calls in March and April because if you're a contractor and you're trying to make sure that you can write off that payment you made to a subcontractor and you need their business license. So what's that subcontractor going to do if they don't have one? They're going to go get one real quick and that's going to be chaotic. So my advice would be if you're working with a sub, gather this information beforehand and make sure they have their license beforehand. You're going to need the name, address, license number of the sub, and we recommend you maintain a copy of that license in your records. This is a screenshot of what it looks like when you pull up the return on TNTAP, the subcontractor worksheet. You just plug in your numbers there. You can upload a CSV file. We get the question often from, especially from CPAs and accountants for contractors, because you've got all this information, tons, especially with subcontractors. You are able to upload it in a spreadsheet or a CSV. You just answer yes when you get to that point on your return. You have to upload both the return and the subcontractor worksheet. You can't do the return on TINTAP, fill it out on TINTAP, and then upload the subcontractor worksheet as a CSV. You have to do both. We've got some resources here. It's pretty slippery. If you understand, if you can get a solid understanding of how the CSV files work, we've got great instructions, very detailed step-by-step instructions on these links here of how to do it. It's pretty particular the way they want these CSV files to be formatted. But once you get them formatted and understand that, it might be a good way if you have a lot of jurisdictions you work within and you have a lot of subs that you deal with, this may be a good option for you. We talked a little bit about closing locations. That's totally up to your prerogative whether you want to close a location for which you have had one in the past, but maybe you're no longer doing work. We say here, if you finish a job in a city with no prospect of another job in that same city or jurisdiction, you may want to go ahead and close it out after you've filed for those receipts there. Snip here of how you close. If you're familiar with TINTAP, you may already know this, but under your business tax account, you just click on additional actions and then close account, and then it'll give you options there of which locations you want to close. Right now, I think since we're kind of limited on time, I'm going to open up the chat and probably, hopefully, refer to some of these resources that we've got here as we're chatting. Give me just a minute. I can't talk and chew gum at the same time. Attendees can now chat with our panelists. So that's done. You can add any of your questions into the chat at this point that you've got. And Billy, Mitch, if y'all want to join me again, we had a ton of questions, or several questions, come in on your registration forms that were really great. And we answered a lot of them with our slides, actually. We had pretty detailed information here, but anything else you've got to just throw into the chat? Are y'all seeing anything in there, guys?
Yeah, people are asking about the PDF for the presentation today. I'm looking to get that,
Okay.
and I'll post it in just a second. It's where you registered, and that was just posted this morning. So if you were looking before and you couldn't find it, there was a reason, because it wasn't there. How
It's
about
there now.
that?
It's also in the very
Now it is.
beginning of the chat. It's one of the first things I put in the chat. Up at the top was a link over to it.
Oh, okay. All right. There you
We can
go.
put it again so they don't have to scroll
I
up,
will put
though.
it. I will. Frantically searching right now. Here we go. Okay. But Katie, I think you did an excellent job of explaining the nuances of this thing, and it's not easy, particularly for contractors. I think Mitch would agree too. We get a lot of questions in the call center and also by email regarding business tax. And it's kind of a hard bear to kind of get your hands around sometimes. Would you agree, Mitch?
No, I would 100% agree. It's all dependent on those thresholds for both in-state and out-of-state. And so once you can determine those thresholds for each jurisdiction, then you can sort of go off those charts to determine, where those sales need to be reported, whether it needs to be at a deemed location or if it needs to be sourced back to the domicile location, or for out-of-state, it would be that out-of-state location, the 9999. So it's all dependent on those sales thresholds, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
It looks like we got a question here from Jeremy about a business obtaining a contractor's license and was apparently used to be a class 3 service provider. Do they need to close that out and reopen it? I would say that we do need to look at their gross income for the year about what's going on that. What would you say about that, Mitch? What would you tell them if they called into the call center?
I'm trying to find Jeremy's question. Let's see. If a business obtains a contractor license and begins doing work as a contractor according to the state law definitions, does the business need to close the class 3 license and open a class 4 for the contractor, or is the location just modified to a class 4? We can definitely change locations, classifications. However, it really just depends on if that in our system, class 4s, they're treated a little bit differently other than other classifications. And so if it's a county only situation, we may be able to transition it to a class 4 from a class 3.
Right.
If it involves a city, then we may want to close out that class 3 and just reapply as a class 4 starting over, because that changes how the registration aspects of that location within our system. Would you recommend that, Billy? So
Yeah, I would. And we
okay.
also have to look at the amount of the gross income, for the entire tax year too.
Right.
Was that service based or contract based too? So we have to kind of look at that. So that's situational is what I'm saying. And
Mhm.
Also, if
and
it's a example that it's popping into my head is you've got a contractor, but let's say he does some work on the side and builds playhouses and sells them or something. Does something where they're maybe selling products. If they are meeting the threshold in that other classification of class 2, or if it was class 3, then they would still need to have that as well.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if that applies to what his question is asking, but
Okay, very good.
We also had one question from Ryan. He stated, Billy touched on this, so did Katie. Can you revisit the reason why one contractor with 4 million in gross is paying 8,000 in business tax and another contractor with 1 million in gross is only paying $22? I would say it just depends on where those sales are sourced. I would
Correct.
need to see how the 4 million and how the 1 million are broken down per jurisdiction to determine, why one business is paying 8,000 as opposed to another business paying 22. And so it really just depends on where those sales are sourced pertaining to specific jurisdictions.
Mhm. That's correct, Mitch. And sometimes it seems a little obtuse, and maybe the examples that we gave were a little bit, out there as far as money wise goes, but they were intended to give you that more of a bright line understanding of how that works. But this is the way that the state legislature wrote these laws relative to contractors. To give you a little background, as you can see here, when you eclipse that $50,000 mark, you're essentially treated with these deemed locations as if you were in that community, in that city, in that county, in that. And the reason the legislature wanted to do it that way is because they wanted all the cities and counties where the contractors are working to basically obtain the tax benefits for these people doing these activities in their cities and counties.
Right.
So, but sometimes, like, and I think Mitch was alluding to this too, and so was Ryan. I think in his question, when you're under the thresholds, it can obtusely put money more back into another area, or perhaps even exclude it, like Katie mentioned. If it's a lot of small pieces of the pie, they don't get taxed. What'd you say, Katie? Poof, something like
right.
that, right?
Yeah.
So weird, right?
Mhm.
It's the way the law's written. Okay,
Yeah.
this is maybe a good time to mention this too, guys. We're recording this today in late March of 23. There is legislation currently being considered by the legislature right now that could change business tax, particularly for contractors too. We won't comment about that right now because it's not been passed. But when these changes do go down, assuming that they will be heavily publicized on our website. We'll do education and outreach as we always do. You can go to our website under legislative updates and look for lots of resources there too, should this happen. Okay. But we want to put that on your radar just because we know that there's some activity there. But we will wait until we get the final public chapters, which is effectively the law, so that we can properly react to what the legislative intent is. Okay.
Proceed for filing for this current period. So for the 2022
Absolutely.
filing period that's going to be due here next month, the law, even if the bill passes tomorrow, that
Mhm.
changes business tax, it won't go into effect till later.
That's
Way it's written right now.
100% correct.
So,
Correct.
That's
so
right.
the,
Yep.
Just do what you do. Right.
yeah,
Exactly.
for
Thank you,
this
Katie.
year,
Perfect.
proceed this way, but we have no idea what's going to happen, but some big changes could come. And if they do, we'll probably re-record this thing, right?
And
Right.
we won't
Yep.
make those changes on you last minute. So
No, that's for
No,
sure.
no, hopefully not.
Here's a question. Do you guys have one-on-one business tax training? And the answer to that is no, we don't have one-on-one business tax training, but what we do have is the webinar library. And Katie, if you want to show them where they can go to look at that
Sure.
webinar library, that would be great. And while you're doing that, here's another question. Is there an easy way to obtain business licenses for multiple locations without physically going to these county clerk offices? What's the answer to that?
Most of the counties, you can obtain a business license through their website.
Mhm.
A lot of the cities, it's the same way. You just have to look them up one by one to see if that particular jurisdiction offers online business license application. If not, you gotta truck it down to the office.
Yeah, here's what I would do too, Katie. It's very similar to what you were saying there too. Mitch, you may agree with me on this too. So first step, go on 10 on your account and see which licenses have been approved by the local officials. Okay. And like we just mentioned there, local officials can approve these licenses to go to the 10 system so that you can view and print them. However, some local officials, particularly, I'll give you an example in Nashville, Davidson County, um, they do not choose to do that. They do not. They want to issue a paper license. So because of that, you would need to reach out to the Davidson County Clerk's office in that example, and hopefully by phone, probably easier, and say, "Hey, can you get me a copy of my license?" Sure. Make sure that you filed and paid first, of course, and give them a few days. You know how it goes with electronics and everything. But do that, and then of course you can walk into the different county clerks and city clerks offices, but I think a phone call would be a little bit easier. Now, what makes it harder for the contractors, and you folks know this, everybody on here who may be dealing with a contractor, when you have dozens of licenses, it's not easy, y'all. Well, I will not sugarcoat that. I get it.
So
So
true.
so it is what it is, but the local officials are by law the licensing officials as we speak today, and they are to issue the licenses. We cannot issue a license at the state level. We don't do that. We provide 10 as a convenience for local officials to post a license that they have approved. Okay. Did I say that right?
You
no,
did.
I
Yeah.
yeah, I 100% agree. Yep.
Okay, cool.
I'm going to show people real quick where to get to the webinar video library and how to get over to the business tax guide, which has a great, or manual, I should say, it has a great chapter on this. And then unfortunately, we're out of time. So let me just quickly show you some places. This is tn.gov/revenue. Scroll down to taxpayer education and outreach, and then tax webinars. This is where you navigated to get registered for today. Scroll down to the bottom here, you'll see a webinar video library. You can filter or sort by category or tax type. If you were to look for all the filing the business tax return there, that's the one that I was telling you about. The business tax manual is under tax resources, then tax guidance, and then under tax manuals, you're going to click on business tax and then click on the manual. It's a big PDF that you can search through using Control F, but just want to scroll down here in the table of contents towards the end. Where is it? Yep, chapter 11 is industry specific guidance. There's a whole chapter here, about 10 or so pages, that's dedicated just to contractors. If you're still a little bit confused, I would recommend you going to this source and reading these 10 pages, maybe even a couple of times. I've had to do that several times myself. The examples that they give are great. Might help just drill it in for you. Go back over to the PowerPoint so I can put up our contact info. Important, very important here, especially since I yapped so long and we didn't get to everybody's questions. You can go to our website here, tn.gov/revenue, or email us if you have a question that we didn't get to or that you can't find an answer to when you look in our manual or any of our help articles when you go to Revenue Help. Email us or call us. You can email revenue.support@tn.gov or call Mitch's group, a great group. Unless it's the week of tax deadline, we'll get right to you, right? 615-253-0600 is the number for our general tax call center, and his group is well trained to answer these questions as well. So email us or call us if we didn't get to your question. Billy, Mitch, anything else on business tax for contractors before we say goodbye?
Just mention real quick, Katie, about CPE credit for those that are
That's
trying
right.
to get that, just to be sure they understand.
Absolutely. This is a new thing. Just in January, we started offering CPE credit. If you are on this webinar and want CPE credit, make sure that you take a brief moment to complete the survey after this. You don't have to answer none of the questions are required, but if you want CPE credit, you have to answer yes to question 4 on this post-event survey that'll pop up as soon as you leave. That's the way we'll know if you need CPE credit, and it will get sent to the email that you provided with your registration, with the name that you provided in your registration.
Yeah, and the only thing I'll add is I'm sorry that we weren't able to get everyone's questions in the chat. Please give us a call or send us an email, and we'll be happy to get you an answer to your question.
Absolutely.
Yep. And we will see you next month on the last Tuesday of the month for our tax webinar, which on May 30th is Tennessee tax exemptions for nonprofit organizations. So hopefully we'll see you then, and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone. And
Bye,
thank you,
everyone.
Mitch and Billy.
You're welcome.
All right. You're welcome.
Bye.